Welcome to Your Success Podcast. We give you actionable insight and stories behind real-life success wherever you go.
Welcome to Your Success Podcast. I'm Angelos, and today we're doing a special Property Nightmares interview with my special guest today, Mr. Roy Inman. Hello, Roy.
Hello, Angelos. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Really pleased to have you on the podcast. Now, Roy's a good friend of mine. We worked together in the past. You've helped me with various bits and bobs, giving an overview of various things in my property business. So it's really pleased to have you on board here because you have a lot of experience and knowledge when it comes to the world of investing. Now, for those of you at home who don't know what the Property Nightmares Special Edition is, I'm writing, and it hopefully will be soon, published a book called Property Nightmares, How People Can Learn from the Mistakes of Others to help reduce their stress, loss of money, and just make their property business, refurbs, buying, etc., a lot easier. Plus, it's got a few amusing tales from both my experiences, but also other professional people from the world of property. So really excited. Check it out, propertynightmares.co.uk. Right, Mr. Roy, can you tell our listeners at home a little bit about yourself and where you are now, so they have some context on, what you've been through? And we're going to talk a little bit about your journey today, aren't we?
Yeah, so I suppose where I am now, very much 90% of what I do, I suppose, is property related within investing. And my businesses, I've got a portfolio of properties that I built over the years. Got 70 properties of my own in my own personal portfolio. And alongside that, I've got the letting agency that I built off the back of that, mainly because at the time, as I was growing that, I had major issues with agencies. There was a lot less regulation, things around. And I just brought everything in-house. And then people started to ask us to manage it, the systems and everything that we had in place and the way that I'd structured it. And that's just sort of grew and grew. We now specialise in HMO, property management professional. We don't deal with students. I think we manage somewhere in the region of around about 350 rooms, along with single lets, for another 150 plus single lets at the moment, and a couple of bits and pieces that we've got on the go with that. And then, just various other bits and pieces with property side of things, really. And that's kind of built and grown and spanned over the last 19 years, really, through the last recession into obviously what we're dealing with at the moment. Just different bits and pieces, really. There's a few avenues that we're looking to go down with at the moment, a couple of things that we're looking to do to merge and streamline things, but everything's very well systemized. And I'm actually currently in the position of arranging a move 265 miles away from my business. And we went into lockdown 2 months ago, and the decision has been made that I've been made redundant and will never be returning to the office apart from for meetings. So it's been an interesting time over the last couple of months, but also helped to see the strength of our business, and that now is the time for me to really take a step back. And I'm going to be solely managing, so to speak, and even then I'm not managing the operations, but overseeing and looking, just solely focusing on the growth. When I say remotely, not even just from home, from 265, nearly 300 miles away. So that move should hopefully be happening within the next couple of months, and South Coast and home, here we come.
I think it's fair to say then, Roy, that you've been through some interesting times, whether it's the 2008 recession or whether it's the 2020 corona pandemic that we're going through, and you've come out fighting and stronger from it. And also, for people to understand what that means, the fact that you're going to be hundreds of miles away from your office, and to be effectively made redundant from the office, means that you must have some very strong systems and processes in place in order to make sure that your business runs automatically almost, without any intervention from yourself. So that in itself is a big achievement. But I hate to use the old cliche, Roy, but it wasn't always like that, right? I know that you used to be a chef, and you've made the transition from being a chef to an investor. Why did you make that jump? And can you tell us perhaps how you made that jump and perhaps some of the issues you faced along the way?
Yeah, it depends on how far I go back. Yeah, I left school as a chef at 16. Didn't really. It was a difficult one. I say difficult one. It was an interesting one looking back, because at the time, as far as I was concerned, I didn't have even the qualifications to do A levels. I loved cooking, and the thought of going to university, it wasn't even a thought. The mindset I had around going to university was that it wasn't even an option. Nobody in our family, my dad hadn't gone to uni. I'm not sure if my uncle had gone to uni per se. I know his sons had, but they lived in South Africa, so there wasn't anyone to turn to as a mentor, so to speak, or to ask questions. And so although my parents did the best that they could for me, they didn't know that route. As far as I understood, we didn't have the money to put me through uni, and I didn't know anything about the grants and funding you could get. So for me, it wasn't even an option route. I loved cooking, and that it was something that I could do and get into sort of when I left school. The transition really, it was interesting at the time, because my dad was also saying, is this really the avenue you want to go down? Some really unsociable hours, you're going to be working weekends, and as 16, 17-year-olds, you know best. And I was doing those hours in the job that I was working and loved every minute of it. But you don't think about the relationships, the family, and those avenues aspect to it, and how it will impact and affect that. But if we go back even a few years before I sort of went down the chefing avenue, I've always kind of had that investor kind of thinking process. My father had mentioned around some ideas that he'd had when I was a teenager back in the 80s. He'd had, in fact, back at the end of the 70s, end of the late 70s, he actually structured a vendor finance, effectively deposit deal, without even realizing what he was doing. It was with his brother, but his first house that he bought, he couldn't raise the deposit or all of it. I know it was a big chunk of it. So he got the mortgage, bought the property, and then paid his brother off paid the deposit off over time, and effectively structured a creative deal at the end of the 70s. And then going into the 80s, he had the idea of buying a property, doing it up, trying to get it and adding value, whether it was buying it a bit cheaper because it needed work. He hadn't thought about it in detail. It was just an idea. And he bought a property, bungalow in Swanage on the south coast, which we still own. And it was a small development of 4 bungalows. And it was the last one to be finished. He bought it from the developer before they finished it. He finished off the landscaping and some of the inside, but got it a little bit cheaper. And his idea was to do the property up, add value. The idea of it doubling value over 8 to 10 years, sell it, and then split the equity, buy one to live in, and then do the same, but basically split it into 2. And then rent one out and do the same again over, say, a 10-year period. They double in value, sell both of them, and then buy 4, which, to be honest, is quite if you start at a young enough age, for a pension plan strategy, low stress and long-term plan is actually really quite, to a certain degree, quite solid, as long as you buy in the right way and it still makes money from a cash flow perspective. You don't want to rely and because you can't guarantee that properties will appreciate in value and certainly double. But it's not a bad thinking, certainly back in the 80s. But things happened kind of over that time, parted with my mum. And he even says himself that in his mind, he went from this idea of doing that to I can't do it anymore, because he ended up buying my mum out and refinanced. And I know that this is a story he would more than happily share with everyone, because they're his exact words that I'm saying. But he explained this idea and he didn't do anything. And I took that, and it was always there, and kind of had the idea. Monopoly, it is a game I played from a young age. I know it's a cliche, but it is. And people would just get fed up and annoyed with the amount I'd want to play it and whatnot. But even alongside that, I was talking to my children a few weeks ago about our stocks and shares portfolio. And at the age of kind of 12, 13, I was playing very, 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 very basic stocks, and it was more metals and minerals trading on ZX Spectrum, and just buying, and when the price goes down, buying some more, and if it goes up, selling them, and just playing around with it like that. And I sort of started buying some stocks and shares when I was 18 as soon as I could, and was dabbling. I wasn't making loads of money or doing anything, but I want to say I've always had that thinking process, and always had that interest in that side of it. So it was always there, but it was just the understanding and knowing of how. And there's many things that have over the time that could have gone one way or the other. I had this idea, I wanted to do it. I qualified as a chef, and then I was going to go and work I did go and work in the south of France in the ski Alps in a hotel. And just to give you an example of where you can make a decision and different paths go, I went over with the view of, I'm going to do that, come back, and then I'm going to start really looking into this property stuff. And this was over Millennium New Year. And then I came back to 2000, and that year I was turning 20. Now, while I was there, I met someone who'd come over to basically be the maintenance guy for the hotel, and he was actually a builder. And I was having a conversation with him and saying about what I wanted to do. I was going to go back and I was going to look at investing in property, and didn't know how I was going to do it. I had no money. I didn't know where I was even going to start. And he would tell me he'd been telling me about the fact that between his building jobs, he would buy a property, do it up, and effectively flip it on and make a profit. But when I told him about what I wanted to do, bearing in mind he just told me what he did between his jobs, when I told him what I wanted to do, he told me not to do it. And it was the craziest thing to even consider. So if I'd listened to that, I could still be a chef today. And in the current climate, that would mean absolute stress and disaster, because I probably wouldn't even have a job.
So it's interesting, Roy, then, how one conversation could have potentially swayed your entire life career.
Yes, 100%. Yeah. And I know that in Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and there's, which book, if you haven't read, you definitely should read. They refer to a poem in Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It's called, I think it's by Robert, just bear with me and I will tell you exactly who it's from. It's called The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost. And if you've never read or listened to that, I would 100% recommend reading it. It's a fantastic poem, and it's all around the road not taken to past Converge, and it's which way you choose to go. And if you'd gone the other route, you possibly wouldn't be where you are today. And that is exactly what's happened with me over the years, over the last 19 years, and going right back to even that moment right before coming back and starting. And luckily I didn't listen to him, and I came back and I'd made the decision that was what I was going to do. And there wasn't training courses and podcasts and everything around. In fact, when I started, I think they founded Rightmove in 2000. Now, the difference between founding and launching are two very different things. I don't think Rightmove was actually properly launched until 2002. And I bought my first property in 2001. And even in 2003 and 4, you speak to an estate agent and they would want you to give your full address and they would post you out the details. They weren't even on email yet. So you talk about the things that have happened over the years, the changes and the way that things have evolved and how it was. There wasn't even really, there was no Rightmove. It is a very different world. But I was on a webinar on Monday night, and I shared this with them that I was running. And to put that into context, though, one thing I will say is that everyone, and I've done this myself, is it's very easy to get desperate about doing deals and doing as many and worrying about there not being deals around. And I had that certainly in probably the first 5-6 years. But we're going back 15 years. I was worried there weren't going to be deals going forward, especially when the market got hot. It was a seller's market. Obviously, as things creeped up going into 2007, 2008, before the crash, it was very easy to be sucked into, there aren't going to be any deals around, there aren't going to be any deals around. Now, take the lesson of, we're now 12 years, 13 years on from that peak of when the panic of there's not going to be any more deals around. Are there deals? Yes, there are. And in 10, 20, 30 years, there'll still be more deals. They might be structured differently. They might be different types of deals. They might be worked in a different way or monetized differently, but there will always be deals available. So one of the biggest learnings and lessons and tips I suppose I would give is, don't worry about the fact that whether there'll be another deal just around the corner. So,
cool. So Roy, you're a chef, you transitioned to becoming an investor. You also decide to start your own letting agency, all in a very short space of time. So I can imagine that could have been a little bit pressured and stressful for you. And also, I know that you've written in the book that you have a very strong sense of what is right and honourable. Those are strong values within yourself. How was it when you started mixing with people with differing values? And how was it in that period of time for you from a personal point of view? Because you must have had a lot of pressures on you whilst you're juggling all these different balls in the air.
Yeah, it's like anything, there's always life lessons. I was very lucky to grow up in a small town on the south coast in Dorset, Swanage. I think the population's only about 11,000 people. You could say that the downside is everybody knows everybody, which is good in some ways and bad in others. But to grow up as a child, it's a lovely holiday resort. You couldn't want for a better place to be brought up. The downside to that is that you're also very sheltered from the real world to a certain degree. You compare that to the rough ends of Manchester or Bristol or any big city, even Bournemouth and Southampton, which is not so far away. Those life lessons, you get brought up with very strong values, and you get brought up to very easily and to be taught to treat people the way that you would want to be treated, and everybody is very nice and happy, but there isn't so much in that environment of being with people not having the same values. And when you meet people that don't have the same values, sometimes they can take advantage of you, screw you over, and a number of other things. And yes, I've had to learn, unfortunately, those lessons the hard way, from agents stealing rent money to builders, all sorts of things. And it is difficult, and it is a challenge, but I suppose you just have to kind of look at it to a certain degree as either learning from somebody that has been through that and how to structure and work that, or you need to look at it as just part of the learning. At the end of the day, yes, there's going to be ups and downs, there's going to be challenges, but as long as you never, ever give up, you'll always get there in the end. And if the outcome is worth it, then there's absolutely no reason why not to power through that. And the biggest one, which I know we've had conversations about before, and I know that we'll come back to this conversation probably in the near future, but everything that you do and all of the things and struggles that come up, to get through them, to keep going, to power on, always 100% comes back to one thing, and that is why. Why are you doing what you're doing? Why did you start on that journey in the first place? What was the reason that you made that decision to move into that space? So just to go back to your question around moving from chef to investor, my why was very much around not wanting to work weekends, not wanting to work evenings, and also being able to provide my children and family, when I do have them, the life that I wanted them to be able to have. Up until last year, I'd never been on holiday abroad with my parents. Unfortunately, I lost my mum a few years ago to cancer at the age of 59. I'm never going to have that opportunity. So there's things that I never did as a child with my parents. Don't get me wrong, we had lovely camping holidays. We had a caravan, absolutely loved it. Loved everything about my childhood and the way that my parents brought me up, and they did everything they could. But there were things that I wish that we could have done together as a family. And I wanted to be able to make sure that I was in a position to not only have those things with my family and my children, but I also wanted to be able to be in a position where I could teach my children the things that they needed to know to not be reliant on a job, and to be able to understand finances and financial management. And I wanted to know that they would have the right financial intelligence that they needed to be able to make money work for them and to move into that next level. And the best way for me to be able to make sure they had that was to pave the way, to show them that I went from having just over £1,000 in the bank when I started to we now live in this house and have these holidays and do all of this. But it's because of this, because of the way that we do this and because of the way that we think about money and the financial intelligence around that. We do have conversations about money around the dinner table, which I know most people don't. And we always talk about business and investing and money and everything from that perspective. And when you try and teach and explain to a 7-year-old, a 9-year-old about stocks and shares, and that we own Facebook or Google or Apple or MasterCard, they're like, what? Because the names they know and understand, but obviously when you say you own a bit of it, they're like, so you own Google? I was like, no, I wish. But then you break it down into, so look at the house. You've got all of the bricks in the house. Each brick is a share. So someone can own 1 brick or they can own 100 bricks, and they own that percentage of the house. Now they could own all the bricks, but it just depends on where that fits. And it's breaking it down into that side and bringing it through. So, and we play games, we've got cash flow for kids and other bits and pieces. But the key bit with it always to get you through those challenging times, no matter what you're facing, no matter how difficult things seem to be, is always why. Why are you doing this? Why did you start? What is the reason? And it will always come back to that, and that will always get you through.
So it seems to me, Roy, I mean, I don't know exact figures, and I don't want to know exact figures, but it seems to me that you've gone from being this chef who's probably fed up with the environment that you're in. You want to create something special for your family, and you've embarked on this voyage on your little wooden sailing ship, but you came across some stormy seas along the way to your destination, didn't you?
Yeah.
I know you've written about this in some detail in the book, and it's a very powerful story that you've shared with people. And you went through an interesting time where perhaps you were overloaded a little bit, and you experienced, I think you've written about it, you were diagnosed with depression at the time. And can you just talk a little bit about that? And what do you think the trigger was with this spiral downwards, and how did you deal with it?
Yeah, so on any journey, and certainly anything that's worth doing, there's going to be ups and downs. There's always going to be highs, there's going to be lows. And how you manage and deal with that and see the external factors is always going to play a part in where that all fits. And yeah, there was a time that I was diagnosed with depression. It was fairly mild in as much as it wasn't sectioned or anything, but I know I kind of lightly joke about it, but I suppose that's me kind of accepting the fact that I've been there with it. because I do know that it can be very, very, a very, very detrimental mental illness, and that some people really do suffer from it very badly. But a lot of it was a culmination of many different things that built up from it. But I suppose the biggest element to it was overwhelm and not really dealing with things very well. It was during the last recession or the beginning of it. I'd grown very aggressively sort of in the years prior to that. I didn't have the experience with managing properties, but I'd got so sick of the agents doing such a bad job. I brought everything in-house. At the time of bringing everything in-house, I was also managing refurbs and purchasing more properties. And I just took on too much, really, because I didn't have those skills and the experience from I suppose to a certain degree, from a corporate managerial perspective. I was a chef at the end of the day. I'd literally gone from being a full-time chef. Put me in a kitchen, give me a team of chefs moving at that pace of service, and it's like being a conductor of an orchestra. Absolutely fantastic. Really, you're on it. But I'd never, although I'd done a bit of managerial experience, position work, sort of as a chef manager and things, I'd not been in a corporate meetings, understanding the pace and making sure systems and all of that worked in the way that they should. So I took on too much. And again, you mentioned about the values. One of my biggest, strongest values that I was brought up with was that always pay my debts, always pay my debts. So if I owed anything, then I would pay it. If I started paying a rent at a young age, 13, and I would do my weekly paper round on a Sunday, and out of that I would get £4, and then the kind of agreement was that I had to give 25% of that as rent. Now, I didn't need the money. It wasn't like my dad needed the money to pay the bills. It was just teaching me a lesson that you have things you have to pay out for, and you don't get that money back, whether that's obviously tax or whether it's rent or whatever. And it was the best lesson I ever learned. And I would get my money, I would go home, and I would hand the money across straight away so I didn't spend it. And because that was a value that I had and the way that I thought the whole world worked on, I trusted people to pay their rents. And I wasn't managing it as best I could. I didn't like confrontation and chasing people for rents, and I avoided it. And then when you avoid something, it gets bigger. And that becomes a problem. And then with everything else that was going on, it did just get to the point where I knew what needed to be done, but I just didn't know where to start. I did not know where to start, what to do. And when you don't know where to start, you bury your head, you avoid it, and then it just snowballs and gets bigger and bigger from there. And it went on, my motivation dropped. I went from jumping out of bed at 6 o'clock in the morning to dragging myself out of bed at lunchtime and not really wanting to face the world or do anything. And I had months where I'd gone to the doctor and they'd run every test. Nothing, they checked everything, diabetes and all sorts, and high blood pressure, the lot. And nothing came up. And it was only when I saw a different doctor after it still being the same for another couple of months that he basically diagnosed me with that. And I think for me, a lot of it was not having the understanding of what was happening to me. I didn't know at the time that was what I was struggling with. I just everything was a cloud. I was overwhelmed. I couldn't see the wood from the trees, didn't know where to start, didn't know how to deal with it and manage it. And as I mentioned in the book, it got to a point where I was losing 10, 15 grand a month. Luckily, I had funds available, but that learning cost me £120,000 in money that it just sucked up whilst I basically sorted my life out and got over it. But once I had, for me, once I knew and had the understanding or knew what the problem was, then I could find a solution. And from that, he did prescribe to me some low, I don't even know how to explain it, I'm not a doctor, but I suppose low. He said they're non-addictive, because I know that some antidepressants can be quite addictive. He said they're non-addictive, but they'll just help to give you that little bit of a boost so that you can get on with what you need to do and get out of the spiral that you're in. And as much as I didn't want to take them, because I felt that was me admitting that I had this, I also knew that we had our first daughter on the way, which at this point was only about 3 months away. And again, going back to your why, if I don't sort this out, the whole reason I'm on this journey is I'm going to let Grace down, our newborn, when she's here, and everything that I want to prove and show her. So yeah, I looked at it from a problem solution basis. I got the antidepressants. It was a case of, well, I've got to do whatever it takes, because you have scenarios where that is when you need to achieve something. You have to dig deep. You push through, and you have to do whatever it takes. I got a book on overcoming depression, read the first couple of chapters, and kind of went, you know what, this is not me. I'm getting on this. And I just basically started along with taking the tablets for a couple of weeks, I kind of just got back into my groove a bit. And as you, like anything, when you start to attack something and you start to do it, you see results. That gives you a great feeling, which then gets you to do more in the next step, and before you're building on that. And that was how I suppose, overcome it. But again,
Roy, so it's a matter of, first of all, acknowledging that there could be an issue, seeking help, whether it's looking inside or getting an expert's opinion, looking from the outside in, whether it's medical or professional, whatever it may be, and then measuring where you are, and then creating a plan to overcome it, but not keeping your head in the sand. That's the most important thing, right? Taking action. Yeah. And I think you said it very well earlier, making sure that your why, your motivation is extremely strong, because if your why on going on this journey is, I want a nice car, or I want lots of money, or I, want a lovely holiday or a house, these are superficial things. And if you come across, for example, like you experienced depression, it can very easily knock you off course because it's not a strong enough why. But your why was getting out of a job perhaps that you weren't necessarily very happy with, creating a legacy for your family, and making sure that you could, they could be proud of you, I guess. And you've got something there that you've created for yourself and for your family. And that is, I guess, the thing that dragged you out of this dark phase in your life.
Yeah, it's at the end of the day, but don't get me wrong, some people, and there's no right or wrong, just different, are very driven by materialistic things, by that. And there's nothing wrong with that. If that is what your why is, and it is strong enough, then fine. Acknowledge that, accept that, and go for it. I would love to have a conversation with somebody like that later on in their life and see if it stayed like that right through till the 80s, 90s, or whether or not that changed. But realistically, if your why is strong enough as to why you're doing that, and it could be for your family, it could be just because you can see something you want to change. You want to set up a charity and have a structure and do something for homeless people or whatever it is. But if I'm honest, even when you speak to somebody that's done that, you'll find that there's a why specifically behind why they want to do that. It may be that they were homeless once. It may be that they had a family member that was, or knew someone that was homeless, or they lost their life due to it. It's usually something that is driving them that is stronger than anything that's there. But going back to one of the points that you picked on, the best thing that you can ever do when you are struggling with anything or you're concerned or worried about anything is reach out for help. Seek counsel, seek help, seek mentor, friendship, but try to make sure that the person that you're seeking that from has got the experience and knowledge and potentially qualifications to give you the right advice. Because everybody's got an opinion, but it doesn't mean that they're qualified to give you their opinion, but they may be only giving you their opinion as opposed to experience. And I can give you a prime example of this if you want.
Please.
So I own 70 houses at the moment. I could have been in a position where I easily owned 400, maybe 500, maybe more. The difference between that is solely the fact that I took advice from someone on bridging finance back in probably 2005, when I could buy property ridiculously cheap. There was a lot less competition and a lot more opportunities in different ways that I could have very much jumped on, probably 2004, 2005. And one of the ways I could have easily structured that would have been to bridge it short term and then move it off of that. Done it in a very, if I knew and understood what I was doing. I spoke to someone about that, mentioned it to them, and their advice to me on it was based on their family member, their auntie, who, I think it was their auntie, but anyway, one of their family members who, this is 30, 40 years ago, was trying to sell their house, couldn't sell their house, but they didn't want to lose the house they wanted to buy, so they bridged that while they sold their own house, still couldn't sell it, and ended up losing everything. Now, when that's the advice you get given about something that you're looking to do, and you're already in a position where you've got a portfolio of probably at the time worth probably $1 million or $1.5 million, and someone says they lost everything, I'm going to be honest, you crap your pants and you run as far away from it as possible. But I was given that advice by somebody who had never bought property using bridging finance, didn't know about bridging finance, and their only experience about bridging finance was this negative one of their family member that tried to use it, and I basically listened to that. And again, that, don't get me wrong, I am not complaining about the position I am in. I'm very grateful for where I've got to and what that provides to us. But that was where I took advice from somebody who didn't know, they had an opinion. But going forward, the tip is don't do that. Don't do that.
Well, yeah, or listen to it, but don't necessarily weigh up against multiple professional opinions.
Yeah.
Not everyone knows everything, but like you say, one bad experience doesn't necessarily predetermine your scenario or someone else's scenario. So, weigh it up. Listen to a few people if you're unsure, especially when you're undertaking something as big as what you were looking to do. So I think that's a great tip there, Roy, to be honest with you.
What I should have done if I had the opportunity, I didn't, because the person who had done it had passed away. But if I'd had the opportunity, if it was, because obviously this was a story about somebody else, what I should have done or would do if it was now would be go and speak to them about effectively about what the scenario was and find out what they did wrong, because just by having that conversation, they could have gone, well, I did this and I shouldn't have done that because of this, this, and this. And I was like, okay, cool. So if I don't do that, then it'll all be fine. And obviously it's a different perspective, but the key bit is make sure that you're getting that information from a good quality source. And that was the lesson that I've learned about 2 years ago. 2 years ago? Yeah, 2 years ago. Anyway, in the last 2 years, at some point, I was considering franchising my business. And so on that basis, straight away, I went down the avenue of arranging a dinner with somebody that I knew who had franchised their business. In fact, franchised a letting agency, and had actually sold out for several millions, and someone that I knew. So I arranged to have dinner with them and explain to them what it was that I was going to do and what I was thinking of doing. And their advice to me, bearing in mind they are someone that had done it and sold out, was don't do it. And gave me all the reasons around why. And I actually spoke to 2 people that had done franchise their business. One had sold out, one hasn't. And both of them pretty much said the same thing, because there's many reasons around that and why. So in essence, I made the decision not to. But again, it's about making sure that you're getting it from people that have got the experience and not from someone's opinion. Take it on board, but really make sure that you get that from the right place. Yeah.
So I know you've given us lots of advice on this call, Roy, from your own experience. If someone is going through something similar to yourself or experiencing mega pressures, just to summarize, what tips would you give them in order to get through? I know you mentioned about seeking help and making sure you have a strong why, but any other tips that you could perhaps share just to help give them some hope, I guess?
Yeah, look, obviously there's going back and looking at your why. Now, one of the best things that I would say to look at doing with this, I have a 3-step process for really digging into your why, and I'm happy to quickly share that now if you want. So the first step is to basically think about what your goal is, or what it is that you're doing. What is it that you want to achieve? And if that is to achieve, let's say, £5,000 a month in property, and whether you're just starting out or you're on that journey and you're struggling, you can then go back and look at this. But the first thing to do is look at that and go, okay, what are the top 5 reasons why I want to achieve that £5,000 a month? What are those top level reasons around why? And it could be, well, I want to be able to provide security for my family. I want to be able to quit my job and have my time as my own to spend with my family. Could be top levels of reason for that. When you've got those 5, take each one and then dig into that again. So then ask the question of, why is it so important for you to have financial security for your family? And you should be able to spin off at least 5 more deeper reasons specifically to why you want that financial security. And it could be that you want to be able to make sure that you can provide for your family. You want to be able to learn the lessons along the way, to be able to teach your children. You want to be able to show your children that you can go from nothing or wherever you are now to this other level without having to have loads of money or whatever. And it could be that you want to be able to give your wife the best wedding ever, whatever it is for you. But once you've gone into that, realistically, you've then got 25 deep points under 5 of each of the 5 main points. And then what you need to do is go through all of those deeper points and write them out as kind of like a story and in detail, as if you were explaining it to somebody. If somebody was reading it in detail, it's got the feelings, how it would make you feel to be able to say to your wife, you know what, you got 50 grand budget for the wedding, or 100 grand, but whatever it is, or, you always wanted to go to Greece and have that small wedding with the close family, friends. We can do that now, because if that is where that fits, write down those feelings of not only having that conversation, but seeing your wife on the beach in Greece and how that would be, and all the memories that would come from it. And then when you've got that written out in detail as this story, I can pretty much guarantee you that when you're struggling and when things are difficult, when you're not sure what to do and you're sort of lacking motivation, if you go back and read through that, that will remind you why you started this journey. Why? Because it's not, yes, is £5,000 a month is great, 10,000 great. 20,000 is great if you know what you're doing with it. But the journey to get to it can be a hard road. There are ups and downs. And having that there to really motivate you and push you and drive you forward, especially if it is very much geared around family and you don't have a family yet, then it's even more important. I've got 3 children. They are currently 7, 9, and 11. I can't get away from my wife, along with my wife. It's there with me every day. So from that perspective, I'm constantly reminded why I'm doing what I'm doing, which is fantastic. But if you don't have that, then having that why. But certainly don't be afraid to talk to people and to reach out because, well, the saying, a problem shared is a problem halved. Just by having the conversation and bringing it out and speaking about it, just doing that sometimes can help you see, you know what, this is what I need to do going forward, just by talking about it, even just to a friend or family. But if it's more specific around something that you need expertise, then reach out and get that help. That's going to be the biggest one. And alongside that, I suppose, having a bit of accountability, just to make sure that what you then agree to do, you do, because it is very easy to then go and put your head in the sand again. Whereas if you know that you've got someone checking in with you, then that's going to help you to move that forward. Depending on what it is that you're struggling with, it's better to be taking small steps consistently than it is looking at things and being overwhelmed because you're trying to do a too big a step as well. If you've got stuff that you're struggling with, try and really break it down and go, okay, well, what's the small, most important thing I need to do right now, which then we can move on to the next little bit. Because by doing that, I suppose it comes back to how to eat an elephant. It's one small bite at a time. Look at it that way. Don't look at the elephant. Just look at them. You could look at it as what's going to be the most difficult bit to eat, whether it's the nail or what, or look at it and go, well, you know what, which bit is manageable right now, or what's the most important bit for me to eat. But the key bit is taking those steps forward. But certainly reaching out, getting help, maybe having a bit of accountability and really looking at your why. Because if you don't have a why, then why not just walk away from it all and get a job and make your life easier in that regard? But if your why is strong enough, you'll think I'm crazy even for suggesting that.
Yeah. Cool, Roy. Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us. I know it's been a bit of a personal thing for you, writing it down for the book as well as sharing it with us on the podcast. And I'm sure it will help others, because all of us face many challenges, especially if you're growing a business from scratch. It isn't easy. And there are times where you question everything. So it's really important to make sure that, like you say, refer back to your why, and keep accountable and reach out for help if you do need it. If people have been inspired or would like to get in contact with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
You can certainly get hold of me on social media, Facebook, LinkedIn. Easily find me. There aren't many people with the same name as me, and certainly not in the property world anyway. You can do that, or you can email me at roy@royinman.com. Get me on that email as well. Just reach out, have a chat. We can see if it can help in any way, shape or form.
Brilliant. Right, Roy, well, thank you so much for your time today. Really do appreciate it. And I can't wait to share, because you've written a few stories for the book. So this one, as well as the others, are really going to hit home with the readers. So I can't wait to share that. So thanks again for your time today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
And check it out. The book is coming out in the next few months. It's you can find it at propertynightmares.co.uk. And this has been a special Property Nightmares edition of Your Success podcast. I've been Angelos, and see you again on the next exciting episode. Cheers.
Thank you.
You have been listening to Your Success podcast. Click subscribe for more incredible content. More details can be found at www.yoursuccesspodcast.com.